So they're seeking. They're seeking, how can I incorporate faith into my business? And so what I'm telling them is, yes, you can have a Bible study. Yes, you can have a prayer meeting, serve communion. You can do all these things. You can have a workplace chaplain. But there's 4 steps that I'd like to tell them that you need to follow.
Bob Pruitt is Senior Counsel, Corporate Affairs Director for Alliance Defending Freedom, which is the world's largest legal organization committed to protecting religious freedom, free speech, marriage and family, parental rights, and the sanctity of life. Bob is interviewed by Benedictine College professor and Thompson Center Director Dave Geenens. Listen in as they discuss freedom of speech and best practices for integrating Christian identity into the workplace. Benedictine College is transforming culture in America, one conversation at a time. From our studios in Atchison, Kansas, these are the Benedictine Dialogues.
Bob, it's so great to have you on the Benedictine College campus. Thank you so much for investing the time.
Well, thank you. It's my full pleasure. What a blessing. What a beautiful campus. This is my first time here.
Thank you.
Just gorgeous.
Thank you. We look forward to hosting you tomorrow for the symposium as well.
Yeah, that's another privilege and a blessing. Thank you.
You betcha. So with any podcast, we don't know who's going to be watching, but I trust that there are going to be business leaders watching, and certainly students on this campus, if not from other Catholic colleges, watching this podcast. So the opportunity for ADF arises. Tell us about that experience, what you saw, and what moved you or called you to that particular role, and that happens to be the role you're in today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Alliance Defending Freedom is the world's largest legal organization, nonprofit legal organization, and what we focus in on is religious liberty, freedom of speech, sanctity of life, family and marriage, and parental rights. And so that's our lane. We've had like the Masterpiece Cake Shop case with Jack Phillips. Lori Smith is another case that went to the Supreme Court that's going to be heard. It's already been heard. The arguments were this past December, but the opinion will probably be released sometime in June of this year. And so it's a freedom of speech case. But so we've had in the last 10 years, 14 Supreme Court victories. So in the different realms of our society, so whether it's schools or ministries or businesses, if they have issues with the government intervention, where the government is saying you must follow this sexual orientation, gender identity law that we have, and you can't decide what you want to do on your own. You got to do this. So if you're going to, like in Lori Smith's case, it's called 303 Creative, and she's a website designer in the state of Colorado, said if you're going to produce websites for heterosexual couples, then you're going to have to produce websites for same-sex marriages. And so
it's kind of like the cake story,
the cake
right?
situation.
Yeah.
That's right. That was decided. That was decided on a different issue. They had in Jack Phillips's case, it wasn't a free speech issue because they decided that on a matter of constitutional law, if the state is a bad actor, then the victory goes to the person, and then that was kind of Jack's case. They had talked about his faith and being similar to Nazi and Holocaust, and just really, took a hostile approach to him. And so that was the kind of the foundation of his victory.
Yeah, I remember that in the media, that it was a very hostile, perspective. So is ADF the attorney of record in those cases, or are you the back, I'm not using professional terms, but the back office attorney that's advising the attorney of record?
So we have close to 100 attorneys, and we work nationwide. And so most of those cases we have direct involvement in, where we're the counsel. So for the 303 Creative case that was argued in December, Christian Wagner, who is our CEO, general counsel, and president, she argued that case in front of the Supreme Court in December. So we're highly involved in a lot of cases. But there are so many, like during COVID, and where a horrible situation where governments were saying essential businesses include casinos and liquor stores, but not churches, right?
Right.
So, we needed help, and we have an allied attorney network of 4,600 attorneys across the nation. So they help us with the pro bono aspects of it. So we mentioned Jack Phillips, we mentioned Lori Smith. All of our representation is pro bono. And so we're blessed by the Lord and our donors that provide us the funding for all that. And then our allied attorney network will do pro bono work, but we also will provide them, let's say that I find out that a company wants a Christian attorney or faith-based attorney and they need some tax work or some real estate work, then we can also utilize our network for that purpose. Great. Yeah.
That's great. So now you're in the commercial counseling role at ADF. I'd love to learn more about specific clients, and I know you have to be discretion, and I don't need the names of the clients, but what are some of the biggest fears that clients that you've consulted with? What are they? Because I imagine our audience to this podcast is going to be, if they aren't already sitting on their seats, they're gonna get there really fast. Yeah. What's your experience tell you about that, without naming names?
Yeah, so I have the blessing to go and travel across our country and get to meet with businessmen and women that have faith and they want to exercise it to some degree, but they don't know what their rights are. And so there's really not any, we do produce a manual, but there's not, unless you know where to go, it's not real easy to find. And so, you might just hear from the media source or some of these issues and problems saying, well, I don't want any part of that. So they're seeking. They're seeking, how can I incorporate, faith into my business? And so what I'm telling them is, yes, you can have a Bible study. Yes, you can have a prayer meeting. Yes, you can serve communion. You can do all these things. You can have a workplace chaplain. But there's 4 steps that I'd like to, tell them that you need to follow.
Could I push pause for just a second?
You may.
Because it's almost like are you reading from the same book that they are, or where the people are getting their information from outside of ADF? Is it the same law book where they don't know their rights, or is it a function of what people are speaking into the cultural megaphones that are misinforming people?
Well, I think it's more, in my experience, more the latter. So you can't really underestimate the media, and when I call big media. So your main, what we grew up in, NBC, CBS, ABC, and how they're presenting certain things. And so will they highlight the problem and not the benefit? Absolutely. And so that's what they see. That's what they're hearing. And so it's not until you start looking at, we're not the only group out there, but Alliance Defending Freedom is the largest that looks out there and says, you can have faith in the workplace. You can share the love of Christ. And people, I don't remember what administrator it was, but they said, you don't know what you don't know. And so, and so they don't, but they are seeking it, and they are going to this conference. And, when I ask, it's like, well, who thinks that you can serve communion at your business? I would say even now, I've been at this for 4 years, but I would say now, I would say a good majority of them would say, I don't think you can do that. But you absolutely can. And so are we ready to hit the unpause button?
Yes, I was going to go back to the 4. I'm sorry for interrupting you on that one. But
no.
What are those 4 things that we need to hear about?
So the primary one is it needs to be voluntary. It can't be mandatory. You need to be able to explain to them that it doesn't impact their employment or their employee benefits if they don't participate, or if they go and don't, have a high level of participation. That in no way can reflect their bonus, their performance review, the employee benefits. Those got to be completely separate and distinct, and you really have to focus on performance. Main thing is voluntary. What I suggest, let's say you're going to have a Bible study. I recommend that you send out an email to everybody inviting them because you want to make sure everybody's invited, even though it might be called a Bible study. Describe it. And then the other part of that is having a language in there that says that we're having a Bible study at noon on Thursday, and you're welcome to come. I mentioned the Correct Craft Boats. I went to one of theirs that was on Thursday. They served pizza, but everybody could get the pizza, not just the people that stayed for the Bible study. So you could have people getting pizza and walking out. Great, that's fine. No one's making note of that. That's okay.
They'll still be hungry though later, right?
Probably.
Using a biblical reference.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's not the Lord's meal.
Yes.
But so on that you send an email. And you say, well, maybe not everybody is on the email. Great. Post it, where you have to post other like EOC notices. Post it there. Let people know. Let them know that it's voluntary. Let them know it's not going to impact their employment whatsoever. And then what I would recommend is having it on off hours. So before work, during lunch break, after work. Why? Two main reasons. First reason is that it emphasizes the voluntary nature of it. Secondly, I think it reduces animosity amongst your employees. I'll give you an example. So let's say that you have a sales department and there's 4, and Mary and Joseph are going to go to a 10 o'clock in the morning Bible study. And let's say Sally and Dave are going to stay behind. You can only imagine Sally and Dave's discussion. Well, why Mary and Joseph go off to this Bible study? We got to cover their phones. We got to cover their desk. That's not right. I'm not getting paid anymore. They're getting paid to go to a Bible study.
I got you.
So you reduce that animosity.
That makes sense.
And then if you're going to have any level of, let's say, religious activity, Bible study, prayer meetings, any of that, I recommend that you have a statement of faith that you put in somewhere in your corporate documents, bylaws, articles of incorporation. That's important.
And is this item number 2, the statement of faith, or does that go along with the voluntary?
I'm already on number 4.
On number 4, okay.
So one was the big was voluntary, and then getting the message out, emailing, getting the invitations out, and then the third piece being that you need to make sure that you're trying to make the best way to say this, but basically that you're
avoiding the animosity, that piece of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're putting it on different hours. Thank you. Yeah.
And then the 4th item again
is the statement of faith.
Gotcha. So that sounds, I mean, as someone who's been in business for a long time, again, I would bet you if I called my counsel, they would advise me the exact opposite. Why are you suggesting, if not stronger word than suggesting, that somebody puts a statement of faith into their legal documents? Because
courts have looked at whether you're bringing a case or whether you're defending a case, if you're going to do it because of your faith, and remember it's one of the protected classes for Title VII, 15 or more employees through the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You have protected classes: race, creed, color, sex, religion. So, case of Hobby Lobby. So this goes back 3 some odd years. The Affordable Health Care Act comes out, and it mandated that employers have abortifacients, abortion drugs, in their health plans. Mandated. Well, the Green family that owns the Hobby Lobby, wonderful organization, 1,000 stores nationwide, very strong in their faith, just felt like that they're big on sanctity of life, and that it's a very closely held belief of theirs, and they did not want to have abortifacients on their health care plans that they would provide to their employees. And so they took it all the way to the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court agreed with the Greens that they could have faith in the workplace. They could to have faith to the point where they could have an exception to the law that mandated that they have an abortifacients. And then what they did, because a court can test the sincerity of your belief.
Okay.
And so actually, if you go to that opinion, you can see what Hobby Lobby has as their statement of faith in their corporate documents. And that's what the court relied upon to be able to find this exception.
Gotcha. Wow.
So
And that's a big name with a big case that
Exactly.
would reinforce
Exactly.
your sentiment that you're sharing with the audience here.
And I dare say, let's say that they did not. Then it'd been difficult or more difficult to prove that the company was a faith-based company.
Have you ever desired a deeper understanding of the life of Jesus? Be sure to check out The Extraordinary Story with Tom Hoops.
This is The Extraordinary Story, a podcast about the life of Christ. Jesus Christ, God Himself, entered the confusing maze that is our world to show us who we are and to give us His cross as a ladder up and out. This is His story and ours, The Extraordinary Story.
The Extraordinary Story has been featured in The Loop, Alatea, Our Sunday Visitor, and Relevant Radio. You can listen to The Extraordinary Story on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And now, back to the show.
You've always heard it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And we're at an age where we finished at different places than where we started. But your career path is going to be of interest. Could you please share a little bit about how your career started? How did you get into law? What was that practice like? And look forward to hearing about that.
Sure, I appreciate it. So basically, I don't know if it was Perry Mason or what it was, but
you're dating yourself, you know.
I know.
Right,
well,
yeah.
Since the fourth grade, I either wanted to be a sports broadcaster or an attorney. And so I felt like that hopefully there was more opportunities to be an attorney, and I thought I wanted to be a civil litigator. So I was for the first 8 years and practiced in Houston. And so I did that, and Lord blessed that. And we were successful, made partner. But there was just something, I'll just say something missing. And so there's I guess a weekend. It's called Walk to Emmaus. And Lord got a hold of me this weekend, and it's an intensive kind of faith-based weekend, and a lot of, but anyway, it's called Walk to Emmaus. And he really just kind of shook me and said, this is not the path I had you on. And being a litigator is great, but the hours are crazy. And I wasn't being the husband I needed to be. I wasn't being the father that I needed to be. And so, fortunately, the Lord took a hold of me in my career path, and very soon after that, I went to work as in-house counsel. So there was a lot more work-life balance at a national distributor, or actually a regional distributor. It's one of the 2 independent regional distributors for vehicles in the whole nation. And so went in-house for that. That led to an opportunity to be general counsel at a company outside of San Antonio. It's a chemical manufacturing company in the automotive sector, and started there for about 5-6 years as its general counsel. And then we had an executive management change, and I was named president, and the rest of my time was there as in the presidential role.
Wow. So for someone who's not in the legal profession like me, differentiate for me the difference between being a civil litigator and general counsel at a company.
So as a civil litigator, you're preparing cases to go to trial, and you're outside counsel. So might have 15, 20, 30 different clients, and they'll either be bringing a lawsuit against some entity, or you're representing, and I typically did the representing side. So that might have been on a product liability case, medical malpractice case where I represent doctors, or in this case it was a lot of automobile dealers. They might be sued for different purposes, and the distributorships. And so through that, you basically prepare cases, go to trial. Many people don't know this. Only about 5% of the cases actually get to trial. Most of them are either dismissed or they're settled.
Yeah.
And but you don't know which ones are going to settle, and a lot of them settle there literally on the courthouse steps. So you're preparing cases for trial, and so you've got what we call discovery. So it's depositions, interrogatories, written questions, requests for production, requests for documents, and then you have hearings and all that. And then depending on the court and where you're at, but 2, 3, 4 years later, you might get to go to trial. And
wow.
I probably had 13 trials during my 8 years. And that was even probably heavy as far as people getting to go to trial.
Yeah. Interesting.
And then as general counsel, what you're doing is that your own client, you have one client as opposed to 30, and that's your company that you work for. And so usually as general counsel, you're kind of the filter for the HR department and their issues, employment issues. How do we need to say this? How do we need to say that? You're managing litigation versus in the courthouse. You might have, if you have 3 or 4 different lawsuits or 50, you have outside counsel that, like I was doing, and so you're managing what they're doing and keeping up with what's happening and where it's going, and you're reporting on that. You're reporting on all the different legal areas to typically the board or the executive team. And then you're reviewing contracts, so you might have software contracts or whatever it may be, and so you're doing that. But the main difference is you're representing one company versus a bunch of them as a litigator.
As someone who's been in business, we never had a business that was of size enough to have a general counsel. I'm curious, just trivially almost, at what size is it appropriate, do you think, for a company that they can leverage and benefit from an in-house general counsel?
It's a good question. I'll throw the first answer, the attorney answer, which is it depends. But typically, it does depend on what industry you're in, because if you have a lot of regulations and a lot of government control, then it could be less. But typically, it's around 100 plus employees is usually where I've seen the dividing line. Sometimes maybe up to 100, 150. But at that point in time, it's more beneficial and certainly probably cost effective for companies to have their own legal department.
Gotcha. When I led 3 companies that had more than 100 employees, so I must have missed the memo from an attorney to hire a general counsel. Yeah. But very interesting. When we left the conversation a little bit ago, you were at a transition point. You were general counsel within the company, correct, and then there was a CEO or executive turnover. Tell us about that. If you could give us a little bit more information about that. And where did you end up after all that shuffle of the deck occurred?
Sure. So, as general counsel, we did have a time at the president, and I'm trying to make a long story short and probably have some discretion here, but let's just say that he kind of got away from his faith, and it caused kind of a ripple effect. And so with respect to his duties and what he, whether or not he was able to function as we needed him to function as our president and CEO.
So if I could follow that up, so you're more than insinuating that faith was an important part of that business. I don't want to just leave that lie. Okay. Tell us about that, because that's not normal, at least in the conversations I have. Most people would not volunteer that, even if it was true. You volunteered it. Tell us about why faith was such a big part of that company.
So we were transitioning into an ESOP company, employee stock ownership program, and so that's where the employees have actually ownership in the company, and they could have 5%, they could have 100%, and so we were transitioning for that. And as part of that, I always kind of felt like that you really wanted to integrate your company and what they're doing and having an engaging experience for employees. And we felt like a necessary piece of that was to be able to have some level of faith in the workplace. And so at that time, it was early on, but I think we had a workplace counselor. And there's now, they call them marketplace chaplains or corporate chaplains of America, and those are some entities. But we were having that, and you could see the difference that, because we're all broken, we all have issues, we all have problems, sometimes more than others. And to have a resource at your business that someone can go to on a confidential basis and be able to share with them what's going on. And the workplace counselors, they are very well trained. They were pastors, And so they knew that only until they established a relationship with the employees that they might be able to introduce the subject of who Christ is and Christ's love for them. But at first, it's just sharing, and maybe kind of helping them along, kind of walking beside them. And so that was kind of the beginning of that. Then after this executive change that we had, so I wanted to go and kind of put the hammer down, if you will, on our faith. Because I believe that was the direction that we needed to go.
So you were selected as the CEO?
I was,
okay.
Yes, sir. And so what we did is we kind of went the full Monty on it. So we had Bible studies. We had where John Eldridge's book, Wild at Heart,
sure.
we did
Great
that.
book.
And we had the workplace chaplain. We had opportunities that we had an employee cup fund. So if someone had, like, for example, a fire at their apartment and they lost things, then this employee cup fund purchased, had them able to repaint and put carpet back down and get a laptop back for them, just help them get on their feet. We had some minimum wage employees, and maybe during this time there was time to take their kids back to school. Maybe they didn't have enough money for school supplies or clothes, and so that was part of the employee fund. So we were really focused in on being engaged with our employees. You can't solve their problems, but you can certainly walk alongside with them, and so we wanted to be a part of that. And so we can get in later, but it was part of that and our successes that it was certainly. You could point to our level of engagement, what we're doing, and that was making us successful on the financial end, on being a best place to work in. It all worked together under God's hand.
Right. How many employees are we talking about at this company when you took over the helm?
Right around 100.
Right around 100?
Yes.
So I'm going to roll the clock back just a little bit. So when you went from being a civil litigator and joined this company as general counsel, were they explicit about the faith element in the business, and how did that impact you and your choice to, obviously you had some practical issues of hours and 30 clients versus one, and not being the spouse, father that you had mentioned. Curious about that.
Sure. So I went from the litigator to the distributorship, and that was a good-sized company, and so I was senior counsel there. But then went to, that was in Houston, and then went to this business outside of San Antonio. And so for me, one of the reasons that kind of intrigued me about this was actually the president's faith. At the time, his wife was having some health issues, and he, in a email to different folks that were in the automotive industry, said, "Would you be in prayer for my wife?" And I certainly wasn't going to hear that in legal when I was doing litigation. I hadn't, great values, the corporation I was working at, but I had not heard someone share their faith openly like that. And so that was really the precursor for me to be intrigued and listen, because I really enjoyed the job I had in Houston. But this, I thought, well, Lord, I really did. I felt the Lord leading me to this position, because there's a much smaller company, but I felt like there's that tug there that said, I've got something for you here.
So when you arrived, because there's one thing for a CEO to say that, and hey, I want to be held accountable for my Christian faith. Did you see manifestations of that? Because you said you did the full, you put the pedal down, the full Monty once you took over the helm. Was there truth in what the CEO was representing in terms of his faith and his company when you got there as general counsel?
Yeah, there were some things that after 6 months that if you are going to hold yourself up, and you are going to be accountable, because people that may not be of your faith are going to certainly say, really, you're a Christian, really that's a background, you're not any different than the bosses I've had before. What's different? So yes, there's a lot of accountability, and I think that was part of why maybe in other companies he would have survived, but he didn't, because we did have a lot of high level of accountability.
So I'm gonna take a little bit of a flyer on this one, that in your experience and having lived the choice and been born witness to the choice of somebody to extend themselves and say, hey, I am a Christian in whatever tradition that I practice it. Do you think the fear of accountability is as much as an obstacle? Because once you go on record, and you're sitting in the top chair, you're on record, and you can do a lot of damage if you don't do it. I'm just curious, in your experience, is that a real obstacle as you interact with so many people around the country in your current role?
So I think that it is, but I think that if you're strong in your faith, you know who your Savior is, and you know what being a life that's led by that, what that is. So that kind of really takes away some of the concerns that you would have of, I'm going to be accountable. Well, heck yes, you're going to be accountable, because you ought to be accountable. One of the things that one of the messages I preach is that, faith isn't just on Sunday. You need to be living faith every day. And yes, if that shows you, if you're walking across the campus here, or you're in downtown Houston or downtown Kansas City, and you need to reflect Christ, and because people are looking at you. And as a company, the people that don't have faith in your company are going to be, how's he handling this? Is he going to be honest with this? Is he, or is it going to be something else different? And I know there was a couple times I thought in good faith it was not as honest as the situation could be, but I was trying to protect people and what happened,
right.
and know where I'm going.
Well, as an attorney especially, because I know how you would advise me if I would come to you in terms of discretion. You used the term discretion earlier, or avoiding defamation or slander, and certainly those types of things, and just for the sake of not hurting somebody, right?
And so I did take, I can't probably get into the details of that, but there was some level of truth in what I said, but I wasn't just as honest as I probably need to be, and I've learned from that, because I thought I've got to be in more prayer. I can't try to take it over myself. And Lord, thanks for all the help when I needed it. I've got it now. No, you always need the Lord. You always need that. And I wish I would have been better about really holding the line on the truth, even though I may have been trying to protect someone or protect our company. It's just in the end, it's not worth it.
Wow. I mean, that's profound, coming from as learned an attorney as you, because that's always been a tension point when I was leading my companies, because the attorneys were always very risk averse, almost at the expense of trust. Yeah. And I was always hypersensitive about trust, and I'm sure I drove my attorneys crazy. But I said, no, I can't not speak this. I'm not trying to harm anyone. I understand your counsel, and I appreciate it, but I need to say it like this.
So I'll counsel a lot of companies now that are faith-based companies. And so one of the things I say is like, well, you can sue a sandwich for not having enough mayo on it. So, the bar is very low in being sued. Yeah. However, if you want to have your best life, be fulfilled in what you're doing, be an ambassador for Christ, because that's what the Bible asks us to do, no matter where you're at, whether you're, a janitor or the CEO or somewhere in between, the Lord asks us to be ambassadors for Him. And so to kind of talk about that, I'll say, we need to be as wise as serpents. So yes, but if we can reach out to the Holy Spirit and be in prayer about what that is and being fervent about that, then a lot of the struggle about maybe protecting something or protecting the company that you may kind of white lie something. When I've done that, when I've really released it and surrendered to the Lord, and I said, Lord, this pickle, what I'm in. I need your help. I need your guidance. And some of the most amazing ways that I didn't even think about on my own, because it wasn't me, comes through in that.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences for sure. Wow, that's good. So you were very aggressive when you became the CEO of the company. And what resources did you use? Did you find anything that was a book or consultants or somebody that made this a lot easier as you tried to not recreate the wheel, but leverage perhaps other people's knowledge?
So one of the resources, maybe a plug for C12, so the C12 forum, that I was a member of that. And so once a month you would go and be with other faith-based leaders.
And this was while you were general counsel,
No,
or
this
while
was
you were
while
CEO?
you're president, because they have groups that are key players, but the main group are your CEOs and presidents and owners of these companies. And so you can share that, and that was very instrumental. Some books like Patrick Lencioni's books that we took a lot from him. He's strong Catholic, and he's really helping out now. Not now, I mean, but he always has, but even more deliberately, faith-based companies. And so we've experienced that at Alliance Defending Freedom. And so he's really helped us, Marcus Buckingham, focusing on your strengths. So, worked all those out, and you could see the level of engagement of our employees. You'd see that we were best place to work, both regionally and even nationally. Our revenue grew, so you'd see the Lord's hand in it, and you can see that there's proof in the pudding when you're having engaged employees like that.
Very interesting. Okay. So walk us now from your CEO of this company. You've implemented a lot of faith-oriented practices. You've received the benefits of the C12 forum, and you've obviously read the books that are common in today's world, because I agree with your view of Patrick Lencioni. He's had books for a long time, but he's really being bold now with his faith, which I tip my hat to him in doing that, because he has such influence over other people. What was the next step for you, and how long were you the CEO of this company?
So for 10 years, 10, 11 years that I was. And so some of the blessings that we had, and again, nothing short of the Lord, some of that period was during the Great Recession. With the Lord's hand, we only lost 1% of revenue during that time. The last 10 years that I was there, so it's pretty much my level of when I was president, we went from $350 per share valuation to $33,500 per share for our annual valuation. So Lord's hand was in that.
You would be CEO of the year by most common metrics of stock price increase. That's fabulous.
But you know what's interesting is that although those are wonderful accomplishments, and I praise the Lord for every one of them, the most important accomplishment I had there is that we were a faith-based company. We provided opportunities for employees to know about the love of Christ, and many accepted Christ.
Wow.
And so, the Holy Spirit moves the hearts. We didn't do that, but we did provide opportunities, and the wonderful evaluation, wonderful being a best place to work, wonderful about having some national companies as your clients. All that's wonderful, but it's pale. All those are pale in comparison to changing people's lives, and see that when they accepted Christ and how he transforms them.
Wow. So you grew the company value a lot, and then did you just unilaterally say, okay, I'm done with this? Or how did your next transition happen?
In the area of time I have to show a little discretion. But so there were a couple issues that we were having to go through, and some personnel decisions. And basically, I just came to a level of disagreement with the direction and where we ought to go with our company. Our mission statement was honoring God by serving our customers and each other with excellence. We were very bold with that. So that was on our website. So there was some talk amongst the board, hey, we need to take that off the website. We can still have it. But, and so some other directional type of, and I was like, not under my watch. Well, God had different plans, so I did need to resign. But that brought up the opportunity to work for Alliance Defending Freedom, which we do now.
Have you heard Peter Freischler's story about the pressure he got when he put their similar mission on their business card, which is spelled out very well in his business card book?
Yes. So Polydeck, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Polydeck, where the sales force urged him, please don't make us go into our clients and show the business card. And what happened was when they showed the business card, the person says, I'm going to give you 100% of the business because I like dealing with people who have principles.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
Again, it's
awesome.
That dichotomy, that sensitivity, the tension that you have to walk, right?
That's exactly right.
But God honors those who remain faithful.
Reminds me of Correct Craft Boats. They're out of Orlando, Florida, so they make ski nautique boats now. But back when they started, their founder, they were given a World War II contract, and they had at that time, we needed to put all of our resources, so they got a contract to build boats. And they said, but we're not going to work on Sunday. And that was almost a deal killer with the government at that time. They said, we're going to make the same amount of boats that you have from your other contractors, same amount, but we're not going to work on Sunday. And it turned out they were producing actually more than the competitors that did work Sunday.
Wow. Well, there you have it. So as we wind our discussion up, assuming there are business leaders in our audience watching this podcast who have been instructed on their rights from the big media, as you shared, as opposed to perhaps what ADF is sharing, what advice would you give them if they're very interested and they've made the decision that they want to orient their business in a Christian fashion or invite God into their work or whatever phrasing they're comfortable with? What would be the next steps or the advice you would give them?
We have a free resource called the Faith in the Workplace Guide. And if you go to adflegal.org, and there's, actually if you type in Faith in the Workplace, no spaces, it will go and you can register and receive a free PDF copy of our 37-page manual. It's not employment, but it's your guide for faith in the workplace. And it answers a lot of the questions with the legal backup of, well, can I have this Bible study? Yes, you can, and this is why. And this is what you need to do. And then the appendix, we're talking about our statement of faith, you can go to that appendix and we have examples of what you can use. And I say you can copy it, you can plagiarize, no one's going to get you in trouble, no one's coming after you, this is a free resource. And then on top of all that, through these different networks, I will also help these individual businesses with seeing their statement of faith or reviewing their employee manual, what they have with respect to the items of freedom of religion, free speech, and those type of employment matters. And so I will actually counsel them and say, I changed this, I changed this, I do this, make it known.
Wow.
So that's where I'd go, is that faith in the workplace guide.
I like that kind of attorney, that you've got this handbook of advice as opposed to the $500 per hour advice. Wow, that's very interesting. Well, Bob, I thank you so much for joining us here on the Benedictine College campus, and I wish you very well. I thank God for ADF and what they're doing, and I wish you all the blessings as you and ADF pursue the good.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's been a real pleasure. So I enjoyed being with you and your audience today. Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed the Benedictine Dialogues, a production of Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. To catch all the latest and support our growing platform, visit media.benedictine.edu. And be sure to recommend this show to your friends and family. Help us to transform culture in America, one conversation at a time.